Hello everyone, welcome to part 3 of integumentary. So we talked already about in the previous recording about the epidermis, that very tiny little top layer, and now we're descending and lowering down into the dermis, which in itself isn't huge. It's only about 0.3 to 0.7 millimeters again. We're talking about tiny, tiny regions. Okay, so the dermis is the largest part of the skin. So in this diagram now we're going right from there down to there, and that's the dermis. And notice how this one now contains blood vessels, right? They didn't go to the very top. So if you were to take a pinprick and prick yourself at the very top here that doesn't descend into the vessels, you're not gonna bleed. Okay, but the bulk of the vessels are then starting here in the dermis and going down all the way. We have nerves, right? This is where those receptors are that are gonna detect touch. You have glands, you have sweat glands. This is an example here. I'll show you. You have a sweat gland with its little opening that goes all the way up to the top. Look, like here. And then you're going to sweat along the skin. So we got glands. You got hair follicles. So they're embedded in here. This is the base of the hair, even though the epidermis has one layer that goes all the way down. So the follicle of the hair. And then embedded around here, you have collagen and elastic fibers. So they're going to give the elasticity that you need to the skin. Elastic means when you stretch it, if you release it, it goes back to its original shape. Collagen is just sort of the overall malleability of the tissue. Elastic is more like stretch. If you release the stretch, it'll return. Okay, so all that is going to be found in the region of the dermis as we descend from the epidermis. If you want to look at what elastic and collagen fibers look like, this is what it is. It's under a microscope. This is not our microscopes. They would have to be scanning electron micrograph. This is what this is, of all of these rope-like structures that are not really cells. They have these fibrous proteins. And so it's not considered a cell, and they're going to fill in this area of the dermis, right? This is distressing. This is a little pregnant belly here, and it's got these marks on it. So these are stretch marks, and we want to know what it is of the skin that's creating a stretch mark. What is that all about? So what happens is that when the skin has to stretch so much, it actually tears some of the collagen fibers. And by tearing those collagen fibers, you see these little strands of sort of destroyed protein. It's interesting. So those are called stretch marks. I just put there, then what do you have? You have stretch marks, which will go away. Okay, so we did epidermis, we did dermis, and now we're going to go down into the hypodermis. And the first thing I always think about when I think of hypodermis is fat. Here, let's see if I can write it out. So this is the one that has a lot of fat in it. Subcutaneous layer, it's packed with adipocytes, and it stabilizes the position of the skin so it's not sliding off. When we dissect our cadavers in our lab, we get lots of big layers of hypodermis there with lots of fat. And that's what we remove for you guys to be able to see in the cadavers. Of course, you can't right now because we're online this semester, but that's what we have to remove in order to make the muscles visible for our courses. When I throw these breaks in, it's like before you go on, just to give you an idea of where you are, you should be able to understand or say or verbalize what two ways the epidermis differs from the dermis. So you should have that down already. And then also I've posted for you a video called The Science of Skin. It's a TED Ed, it's only 5 minutes, and it's on the external video link for you. Okay, so we're done within the integumentary with the skin part, but that's not the only thing integumentary has. It also has hair and nails. We're not going to talk about nails, but we will talk about a little bit about hair. You have hair all over, except in your lips, in parts of your genitals, your palms, your feet. That does not grow hair. You have about 100,000 on your scalp. No, I'm not going to ask you that on a test. It's just to see what fun. And about 10 times more on the face. So just because you think that it's sort of peach fuzzy stuff doesn't mean that you have fewer hairs. No, you actually have a whole lot more, but not as coarse, less visible. You have about 55 to 70 hairs per centimeter squared throughout your body. And I put this again because we've been talking about centimeters. This is a centimeter, less than half an inch. And when I was talking about millimeters, right, of the epidermis, 0.1 millimeter, it was 0.1 of these little spaces. It's crazy, tiny. Okay, there's three kinds of body hair throughout your life. One of them is lanugo, which is the very thin little fluff peach fuzz of a fetus. It doesn't have any pigment, and a fetus will have lanugo a bit, then they lose it. Another pathology is within anorexia. You might grow some lanugo, which is the body desperately trying to keep warm from low body weight and trying to maintain temperature. So you have lanugo in the fetus, vellus, which is in the newborn, very little thin fluff hair of the newborn, and then terminal hair, which is much longer and coarser and pigmented, and that's your adult hair. So you should have gone through these 3 stages of hair on your body. It's also the hair of your eyelashes and your eyebrows and pubic hair and all that stuff. Okay, so let's look at a hair in the dermis here, inserted into the dermis. We tend to have a sebaceous gland close to it because you want to keep this nice and oily. You want to lubricate that hair, not have it dry out. And this hair is coming all the way down here, and notice the artery and the vein. So the artery and the vein is going to come up here and irrigate these cells, which are the ones that are responsible for growth. So you need to bring blood to these developing cells that are going to then grow and push up, die, and push up, push up, push up. So that your hair that you see, that you brush in the morning on your head, is dead, but the base of it is not. This is the base that we're looking at. And I always laugh and say that when we look at each other, we take so much time with our hair and our skin, when what you're actually seeing on the other person are all dead cells. The ones that are on the surface of your skin are all dead, and your hair is all dead. And so that shampoo that says for healthy hair, there's no such thing because it's already gone. Okay, so we have to irrigate the cells that are alive, the ones that are down here in the hair bulb. So hair bulb is this region on the bottom here. Okay, and this is a sweat gland I'm showing you here. That's all the other thing I want to show you. And this other term is important, the dermal papilla. So the dermal papilla then is this region, I'm going to change colors here, is this region here of the hair bulb that's receiving irrigation so that these basal cells, it's kind of like the skin, the basal cells can actually grow and push up. Okay, this is labeled better for you. So here's the papilla, this sort of opening here, and the rest here above is matrix, the hair matrix. Hair bulb is the whole thing. And then there's hair cortex. Every time we hear that word cortex, we mean the outside, like the rind, the outside. And then the core is the medulla. So medulla for the core, and the cortex then for the outer layer of cells. Now written out for you so that you know that you have it in writing. At the base of each root, it forms a bulb, which is an enlarged region. Okay? All this region here, the bulb. Within the bulb is a dermal papilla. It's the region that's irrigated by the capillaries, and that's what's going to irrigate those cells that are responsible for growth. So it's the living cells that divide in the matrix of the dermal papilla. The matrix is everything else that's in that region. It makes that hair grow. Okay, so think about that dermal papilla. If this dermal papilla were damaged, like I've seen individuals get poison oak so badly that they get blisters and it goes deep and it damages the dermal papillae of a bunch of hair bases, essentially, hair roots. If you damage the hair root, that will not grow back. And you will not have hair growing there because that's what needs to be kept alive, the dermal papilla. There is a cycle that we have of head hair growth and loss, and it goes in phases of years. So you have a phase where your hair just is growing and it's doing well and it stays in here and it'll stay 6 to 8 years. Hard to think of that some of that hair that you've still had from 6 years ago, right? And then it'll go through a particular hair, right? We'll go through a stage called, and that's anagen when it's growing. Catagen, anytime it's cat means breakdown. So this is starting to break down. They're starting to degenerate for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then telo is sort of end. Sad, but the lifespan of this hair is ending. And that could be anywhere from 1 to 3 months until it comes out in your hairbrush or in your comb. So it's grown, it starts to cat means degenerate, and then end, it's going to just fall out. It's going to fall out completely and end up in your hairbrush. And then you have an early anagen where that hair has now fallen out and a new baby one, that's a funny drawing, is going to start growing again. And so you cycle through this. You cycle through this with your hair. Interesting. There are some cases where people go through a lot of stress and they lose a lot of their hair. So that's sort of early catagen of hair from stress. If we looked at one hair in cross-section, from in to out, you would have the very center here. Medulla is a word that we use in anatomy, even like when it comes to the kidney, when it comes to all sorts of glands, where medulla means middle here. So it's the center. Such a sensitive mouth I have. And you have really a lot of air spaces. So there's air space in that location. I'm going to try and change my mouse. And then everything that's not the medulla from here to here is going to be the cortex, right? So medulla, cortex, the bulk of the hair, that's where all those keratinized cells are. And then the cuticle is this very outer layer here is a cuticle on the outside. It's sort of scaly. It covers the cortex like roof shingles. It's sort of interesting. See these little layers like this? And that's what makes you look like you have split ends, because this cuticle is breaking away from the hair. Electrolysis for hair is interesting. As I was telling you, if you were to damage the hair follicle here, if you damage where these vessels are coming in, then that hair will not grow anymore. So this is definitely an individual that is a candidate for electrolysis and removing some of that hair. Let's stop there. It's a good slide to stop on. Thanks, you guys.